I arrived at the airport to travel with my son. An immigration officer suddenly grabbed me and whispered, "Pretend I'm arresting you and stay silent." I thought he was joking, but he repeated, his voice suddenly serious, "Please, there's no time." But that wasn't where this story really began. That moment at the airport was just the culmination of everything that had been building for years. To understand how I got there, you need to know what happened before. You need to understand what my son and his wife did to me. You need to understand why I did what I did. Let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Robert Hanson. I'm 58 years old and I used to be somebody. 20 years ago, I owned a successful manufacturing business. We made precision parts for automotive companies, and business was good, really good. I had 40 employees, 2 facilities, and a reputation for quality that meant something in the industry. I wasn't wealthy, but I was comfortable. More than comfortable. I had a nice house, good cars, and enough money to send my son David to any college he wanted. David was my only child. His mother died when he was 12. Cancer took her fast, and after that, it was just the two of us. I threw myself into being both parents, into making sure he had everything he needed. Maybe I spoiled him. Looking back now, I know I did. But at the time, I thought I was just being a good father. I thought I was showing him love. He went to a good university, studied business administration, graduated with decent grades. Not stellar, but decent. I was proud of him. I paid for all of it. Tuition, housing, his car, everything. He never had to work through college like I did. He never had to struggle. I wanted better for him than I'd had. After graduation, David got a job at a tech company called Nexus Solutions. He started as a junior analyst, then worked his way up to middle management. He was making good money, not great money, but respectable, enough to live on, enough to start a life. That's when he met Mia. Mia Brennan was 27 when David brought her home to meet me. She was beautiful. I'll give her that. Tall, with sharp features and dark hair that fell perfectly around her shoulders. She worked in marketing at the same company. She was polished, articulate, and knew exactly what to say to make people like her. I liked her at first. How could I not? She was charming. She laughed at my jokes, asked about my business, seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. She called me Dad almost immediately, which should have been my first warning sign. But I was so happy that David had found someone, so relieved that he wouldn't be alone, that I ignored my instincts. They got married 6 months later. It was a small ceremony. Mia said she didn't want anything elaborate, that she'd rather save the money for a house. I thought that was sensible, practical. I paid for the wedding anyway. $17,000. David said they'd pay me back once they got settled. I told him not to worry about it. Family doesn't keep score, I said. That was my first mistake. The requests started small. A loan here and there. $500 for car repairs, $1,000 for furniture, $2,000 when Mia's mother supposedly needed surgery. I gave it to them every time. David was my son. What kind of father says no when his kid needs help? Then my business started having problems. It wasn't anything dramatic at first, just a slow decline. Orders decreased. Competition from overseas manufacturers intensified. Margins got thinner. I tried to adapt, to pivot, to find new markets, but I was 53 years old and tired. The industry was changing faster than I could keep up. I should have seen the signs earlier, should have cut costs, downsized, restructured. But I'd been successful for so long that I thought I could weather it. By the time I realized how bad things were, it was too late. I had to sell the business. I got about 40% of what it was worth 5 years earlier. After paying off debts and settling with creditors, I had enough left to keep my house and have a modest cushion. Nothing close to retirement money, but enough to survive if I was careful. I was 54 years old and starting over. I needed work, not just for the money, though I needed that too, but for my sanity. So I took a job at Monroe's Auto Repair, a shop about 20 minutes from my house. The owner, Bill Monroe, was an old friend. He knew my situation and offered me work as a mechanic. It was humbling. I'd gone from running a business with 40 employees to changing oil and replacing brake pads. But the work was honest, and Bill was good to me. I could pay my bills. That's what mattered. David and Mia knew about my financial situation. I'd told them when I sold the business. David had seemed concerned at first, asked if I needed anything, but the conversation had been brief. Mia had been quiet, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. The requests for money didn't stop. If anything, they increased. 3 months after I sold the business, David called. They needed $10,000 for a down payment on a house. He said the interest rates were good, that it was the perfect time to buy, that they'd found the ideal place. He promised they'd pay me back within a year. I gave it to them. I pulled it from what was left of my savings. David was my son. I wanted him to have a home, to build a life. What kind of father says no to that? They never paid me back. 6 months later, Mia called. She said they needed money for renovations. The house needed a new roof, new plumbing, new flooring. $8,000. She was sweet about it, apologetic, promised this would be the last time. She called me Dad in that warm voice that made it hard to say no. I gave it to them. Then it was car repairs, medical bills, credit card debt. Each time, they promised to pay me back. Each time I believed them. Each time I told myself this was normal. Parents help their children. That's what family does. But something was changing. I started noticing things. David stopped calling unless he needed something. Our conversations became transactional. He'd ask how I was, but in a perfunctory way, like checking a box on a list. Then he'd get to the real reason for the call. Always money. When I'd call him, he often wouldn't answer. He'd text back hours later saying he was busy, that work was crazy, that he'd call me back soon. He rarely did. Mia stopped calling me Dad. Now it was just Robert. Her tone was cooler, more distant. When I'd see them, which became less and less frequent, she'd be on her phone, barely acknowledging me. I started to feel like an ATM. Then, about 18 months ago, I found out something that should have made me act sooner. I ran into an old colleague, Tom Morrison, at a coffee shop. Tom had worked in my accounting department for years before moving to a position at a bank. We got to talking, and he mentioned he'd processed a loan application that included me as a co-signer. I told him he must be mistaken. I hadn't co-signed anything. Tom got quiet. Then he pulled out his phone and showed me the documentation. David and Mia had taken out a loan for $45,000. My name was on it. My credit was being used as collateral. I'd never signed anything. I'd never even been told about it. Tom looked uncomfortable. You didn't know about this? I shook my head, trying to process what I was seeing. Robert, I'm sorry. I thought you'd authorized it. The signatures looked legitimate. If this is fraud, no, I said quickly. Too quickly. It's fine. I must have forgotten. It's been a busy time. I was protecting them. Even then, even knowing what they'd done, I was protecting them. Tom looked skeptical but didn't push. We finished our coffee and parted ways. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 30 minutes, staring at nothing, trying to understand how my son could do this to me. I called David that evening. He didn't answer. I left a message asking him to call me back. It was important. He didn't call for 3 days. When he finally did, I confronted him. I kept my voice calm, but inside I was burning. David, I need to ask you something. Did you take out a loan using my name as a co-signer? There was a pause. A long one. Dad, I was going to tell you about that. So you did? Look, we needed the money. The house needed more work than we thought, and Mia's car broke down, and we had some credit card debt that was getting out of control. I knew you'd understand. You forged my signature. I didn't forge anything. I just used your information. You would have said yes if I'd asked. Then why didn't you ask? Another pause. Because I didn't want you to worry. You were dealing with enough already. It was a lie. A transparent, insulting lie. He hadn't asked because he knew I would have said no, or at least asked questions, made him explain, held him accountable. David, this is fraud. You could go to prison for this. Don't be dramatic, Dad. It's fine. We're making the payments. Your credit isn't affected. Nobody needs to know. I need to know. This is my name, my credit, my financial future you're gambling with. Jesus, Dad, calm down. It's not that big a deal. Not that big a deal. My son had committed fraud using my identity, and he was telling me it wasn't a big deal. I want you to pay off that loan, I said. Immediately. We can't do that. We don't have the money. Then refinance it in your own name. Get me off it. We can't. Our credit isn't good enough on its own. We need you on it. So you're going to keep making payments? Yes. I told you we're handling it. And what happens if you stop making payments? What happens if you default? That comes back on me, David. That destroys my credit. That could cost me everything. We're not going to default. Stop being paranoid. Paranoid. That's what he called my legitimate concern about having my identity stolen by my own son. I tried a different approach. David, I need you to understand something. I don't have the resources I used to have. If something goes wrong with this loan, if you miss payments, I can't fix it. I can't bail you out. Nothing's going to go wrong. But if it does, it won't. Look, I have to go. Mia and I have dinner plans. David, wait. We need to talk about this more. There's nothing more to talk about. Everything's fine. I'll call you later. He hung up. He didn't call later. He didn't call for weeks. I thought about going to the police. I thought about reporting the fraud. But he was my son. How could I do that to him? How could I be responsible for putting him in prison? So I did nothing. I told myself it would be okay. They'd make the payments. Everything would work out. I was wrong. 3 months later, I started getting calls from the bank. The loan was delinquent. Payments hadn't been made in 60 days. They needed me to bring the account current immediately. I called David. No answer. I called again. No answer. I texted him, emailed him, left voicemails. Nothing. Finally, after a week of trying, Mia answered his phone. Robert, she said, her voice cold. What do you want? I need to speak to David. The bank is calling about the loan. You're not making payments. We had some unexpected expenses. We'll catch up. When? Soon. That's not good enough. They're threatening to report this to the credit agencies. Do you understand what that means for me? That's really not our problem, Robert. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Not your problem? You used my name for this loan. You made this my problem. Look, we're doing the best we can. If you're so worried about it, why don't you make the payments? Because I don't have the money. I gave you everything I could spare. I don't have anything left. Then I guess we're all in a tough spot. Mia, please, I need to talk to David. He doesn't want to talk to you right now. You're being unreasonable about all of this. I'm being unreasonable. Yes. You're treating us like criminals when all we did was try to build a life. You should be supporting us, not attacking us. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there, stunned. In her twisted logic, I was the villain. I was the one causing problems, not them, who'd stolen from me and lied to me and were now destroying my financial stability. Me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction, every request for money, every promise to pay me back. And I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. They'd never intended to pay me back. Not ever. Every loan, every temporary request for help, every urgent need, it had all been a con. They'd been using me from the beginning. And I'd let them. I'd made it easy. The anger that had been simmering for months finally boiled over. But it wasn't hot, explosive anger. It was cold, calculated. The kind of anger that doesn't make you do something stupid. The kind that makes you think. I started paying attention, really paying attention. I drove past their house one Saturday. It was a nice place, too nice for what David made at his job, even with Mia's salary added in. 3-bedroom colonial in a good neighborhood. New cars in the driveway, both of them. A new deck had been added to the back, solar panels on the roof. They'd told me they needed money for basic repairs, for survival. But this looked like the house of people living well beyond their means by choice, not necessity. I started checking their social media. Mia posted constantly, Instagram, Facebook, everywhere. Photos of expensive restaurants, weekend trips, new clothes, a vacation to Mexico, everything tagged, everything documented, everything showing off how well they were doing, all while telling me they couldn't afford to pay me back, all while letting me take the hit on that loan. I set up a meeting with Tom at the bank. I told him I needed to understand exactly what the situation was with the loan. Tom pulled up the account. It's not good, Robert. They're 3 months behind now. The bank is going to start foreclosure proceedings on the house if they don't catch up within 30 days. What about my credit? He winced. It's taken a significant hit. Your score has dropped almost 100 points, and if they default completely, it'll get worse. Can I get myself removed from the loan? Not without their cooperation or paying it off yourself. Do you have the resources to do that? I shook my head. I'm sorry, Robert. I wish there was better news. I left the bank feeling hollowed out. Decades of good credit, of financial responsibility, destroyed by my own son. That's when I started following them. I'm not proud of it. But I needed to understand what was really going on. I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. I waited outside David's office building one evening. He left at 6, got in his BMW and drove to a bar downtown. I followed at a distance, parked where I could watch. He met a woman there. Not Mia. Someone else. Younger, blonde, wearing a business suit. They sat close together, touching casually, intimately. They were clearly involved. David was having an affair. I should have felt something. Shock, disappointment, concern for Mia despite everything. But I felt nothing. Just a cold certainty that my son was not who I'd thought he was, not who I'd raised him to be. I followed him twice more over the next 2 weeks. Same routine, same woman, same bar. Then I followed Mia. She left work early one Thursday, drove to an upscale coffee shop, and met with a man I didn't recognize. They talked for over an hour, their heads close together, laughing, touching hands across the table. When they left, they kissed in the parking lot. Mia was having an affair, too. I sat in my car, watching them, and a strange clarity settled over me. This wasn't a marriage. It was a partnership of convenience, a joint venture in manipulation. They were using each other just like they were using me. And they were probably planning to cash out soon. That night, I couldn't sleep again. But this time, instead of lying in bed consumed by anger, I got up. I went to my desk. I pulled out a notebook and a pen, and I started planning. I'd spent 30 years building and running a business. I knew how to analyze problems, develop strategies, execute plans. I knew how to compete, how to outmaneuver, how to win. David and Mia had made a critical mistake. They'd assumed I was weak, assumed I'd just take their abuse, keep giving them money, keep being their victim. They were wrong. I was going to teach them what happens when you betray someone who knows how to fight back. While you're here, hit the hype button. Don't forget to subscribe and support this channel with a like. And tell us below, have you ever faced something like this? The first thing I needed was information. Real, documented information. Everything I knew so far was based on observation and inference. If I was going to do this right, I needed evidence. I started with the loan. Tom at the bank had given me the basic details, but I needed more. I spent 3 days going through every piece of paperwork I could find. Bank statements, credit reports, correspondence from the lender. I documented everything. The forged signature, the missed payments, the impact on my credit score. Then I looked into David's job at Nexus Solutions. I'd never paid much attention to what David actually did there. He told me he was a project manager in the software development division, managing teams and timelines. It sounded respectable enough, but I realized I didn't know any details. What projects? What teams? What were his actual responsibilities? I drove to Nexus Solutions one morning and sat in the parking lot. It was a modern building, all glass and steel, with a corporate campus feel. I watched people come and go, trying to get a sense of the place. Then I went inside. I told the receptionist I was there to see David Hanson. She asked if I had an appointment. I said no, but that I was his father and was in the area. Thought I'd surprise him for lunch. She smiled and called his extension. No answer. She tried again. Still nothing. That's strange, she said. He's usually at his desk. Let me try his manager. She made another call. This time, someone answered. I could hear only her side of the conversation. Hi, this is reception. I have Robert Hanson here to see David Hanson. He's his father. Oh, I see. Okay, I'll let him know. Thank you. She hung up and looked at me with an expression that was part sympathy, part discomfort. I'm sorry, Mr. Hanson. David called in sick today. He's not in the office. Oh, I said, trying to sound surprised. That's odd. I spoke to him this morning and he didn't mention being sick. She gave me a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. Well, sometimes these things come on suddenly. Would you like to leave a message? No, that's okay. I'll just call him later. Thank you. I left, but I didn't leave the parking lot. I moved my car to a different section and waited. If David had called in sick, where was he? At 11:30, David's BMW pulled into the lot. He parked, got out looking perfectly healthy, and walked into the building carrying a coffee and a bag from a fast food restaurant. He'd lied to his employer, called in sick when he wasn't. That was a small thing, maybe, but it told me something important. David was willing to lie casually to anyone whenever it benefited him. I filed that information away. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched and documented. I followed David to the bar where he met his girlfriend 3 times. I followed Mia to 2 meetings with her boyfriend. I photographed them, time-stamped everything. I also started reaching out to old contacts from my business days. People who knew people. People who could get information that wasn't necessarily public. One of those contacts was Jerry Marsh. Jerry had worked in corporate security for 20 years before retiring. He specialized in background checks, due diligence, the kind of deep research that companies did before major business decisions. I called him and explained what I needed. You want me to investigate your own son? He asked. Yes. Robert, are you sure about this? I'm sure. There was a pause. Then, okay, send me what you have. I'll see what I can find. I sent him everything: names, addresses, social security numbers, employment information, bank account numbers I'd gotten from old checks, everything I could provide. Jerry called back 5 days later. Robert, you need to come to my office. This isn't a phone conversation. I drove there the next morning. Jerry's office was in a small building near the industrial district, nothing fancy. He led me to a conference room and spread out files across the table. Sit down, he said. I sat. Jerry took a breath, then began. Your son and his wife are in serious financial trouble. Beyond what you know about the loan, they have credit card debt totaling almost $90,000 across 12 cards. Most of them are maxed out. They're behind on payments on 6 of them. I felt my stomach tighten. Jerry continued. The house is mortgaged for significantly more than it's worth. They took out a home equity line of credit 2 years ago and drained it. They're 3 months behind on the mortgage, too, not just on the loan they took out in your name. Jesus. It gets worse. David has been borrowing from his 401k at work. He's taken out almost everything he's contributed, and there are records of personal loans from at least 3 different online lenders, all at predatory interest rates. How much total? Conservatively, they're about $200,000 in debt, not including the house. I sat back, trying to process that number. $200,000. How is that even possible? David makes good money, Mia too. They spend more, a lot more. I pulled 6 months of credit card statements. Restaurants, shopping, travel, electronics. They're living like they make 3 times what they actually make, and they're using new credit to pay off old credit. It's a house of cards, Robert. It's going to collapse. When? Soon. Within the next few months. They can't keep this up. Someone's going to start legal proceedings. Probably multiple creditors at once. I stared at the files on the table. 6 months ago, I would have felt pity, concern, the urge to help. Now I felt cold calculation. What about his job? Is he really a project manager? Jerry pulled out another file. That's interesting. I have a contact at Nexus Solutions who was able to pull his personnel file. David is listed as a project coordinator, not a manager. It's a lower position, and his performance reviews are not great. He's gotten written warnings about missed deadlines and attitude problems with team members. So he's been lying about his job title. Yes, and there's something else. Jerry slid another document across the table. This is a complaint filed with HR 6 months ago. A female employee accused David of inappropriate behavior, making unwanted advances, suggestive comments. The complaint was investigated and deemed credible, but David was given a final warning instead of being terminated. The woman left the company shortly after. I picked up the document and read it. The woman's account was detailed and disturbing. David had made her work environment hostile, had pressured her for dates, had made explicit comments about her appearance. Who else knows about this? It's in his HR file, accessible to management and HR personnel, not public. I thought about that. A harassment complaint, poor performance reviews, a position title he'd been lying about. It was all ammunition, but I needed to figure out how to use it. What about Mia? Jerry smiled grimly. Mia's interesting. She worked at Nexus Solutions until 4 months ago. Then she quit. She told David she got a better job at a marketing firm downtown, right? That's what I heard. She didn't. There's no record of her working anywhere else. No paychecks, no employment verification, nothing. Best I can tell, she quit and has been pretending to go to work every day. Where does she go? Various places, coffee shops, the gym, the mall. Meeting with that boyfriend of hers. I followed her for 3 days. She's not working. So Mia had been unemployed for 4 months and they'd been hiding it. Hiding it from their creditors, from their bank, from me. Pretending everything was fine while their debts spiraled completely out of control. Is there anything else I should know? Jerry hesitated. There's one more thing. I found evidence that they've been discussing bankruptcy. Mia's been researching bankruptcy attorneys online. Lots of web searches, visits to law firm websites. They're preparing to file. What happens if they do? To them? They discharge most of the debt and start over. To you? That loan they took out in your name stays with you. You're still on the hook for all of it. They walk away and you're left holding the bag. I stood up and walked to the window. Below, traffic moved through the streets. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that in this small office, a man was learning that his son had planned to destroy him financially and then walk away without consequences. Robert, Jerry said quietly, what are you going to do? I turned back to him. I'm going to make sure they don't get away with it. Be careful. These are legal matters. If you do something illegal, I'm not going to do anything illegal. I'm just going to make sure the truth comes out. All of it. Jerry looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. If you need more help, call me. I gathered the files and left. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with everything spread out in front of me. Jerry's reports, my own documentation, photographs, bank statements, credit reports. It was overwhelming, but it was also clarifying. David and Mia weren't just using me. They were planning to destroy me and then disappear into bankruptcy protection, leaving me to deal with the consequences of their fraud and theft. I'd thought my son had made mistakes, had gotten in over his head, had needed help. But this wasn't mistakes. This was calculated. This was malicious. They knew exactly what they were doing. I pulled out my notebook and started a new page. At the top, I wrote, Plan. Then I started writing. The first phase would be financial. I needed to protect myself from the loan, and I needed to make sure David and Mia couldn't just file bankruptcy and escape. That required timing and coordination. The second phase would be professional. David's career was built on lies and propped up by a company that didn't know about his performance issues or harassment problems. That needed to change. The third phase would be personal. Their marriage was already hollow, held together by mutual self-interest. I could accelerate its collapse. And the final phase would be comprehensive. Everything would come down at once, in a way that left them with nothing and no way to recover. I worked through the night, refining the plan, anticipating problems, developing contingencies. By morning, I had a roadmap. It was aggressive, thorough, and completely focused on one goal, making sure David and Mia paid for what they'd done. I called Tom at the bank first thing Monday morning. Tom, I need your help with something. Can we meet? We met at his office that afternoon. I brought the loan documentation Jerry had compiled. Tom, I need to officially dispute this loan. I never signed this application. This is fraud. Tom looked uncomfortable. Robert, we went through this. You said... I know what I said. I was protecting my son. I was wrong. This is forgery, and I need to report it formally. Tom picked up the documents and examined them. If you file a fraud report, the bank will investigate. If they determine the signatures were forged, they'll press charges. That means David could face criminal prosecution. I understand. You're sure about this? I'm sure. Tom nodded slowly. Okay, I'll start the paperwork. But Robert, this is going to get ugly. Once this process starts, there's no taking it back. Good. I filed the fraud report that day. The bank opened an investigation. Within a week, a detective from the Financial Crimes Unit called me. I gave a statement, provided documentation, confirmed I'd never authorized the loan. The detective was professional and sympathetic. Mr. Hanson, I know this is difficult when family is involved, but this is a serious crime. If the investigation confirms fraud, we'll be pursuing charges. I understand. Do you have any contact with your son currently? Minimal. I'd advise you to keep it that way until this is resolved. Don't discuss the investigation with him. Don't warn him it's coming. Let us handle it. I won't say anything. The investigation would take time, probably a few weeks, but it was in motion. That was step 1. Step 2 involved Nexus Solutions. I'd never met David's manager, but I knew his name from the personnel file Jerry had obtained. Richard Brennan. I looked him up on LinkedIn. He was in his mid-40s, had been with the company for 7 years, had a background in software development. I drafted an anonymous email. In it, I detailed David's lies about his position, his pattern of calling in sick when he wasn't, his harassment complaint, and his current financial situation that suggested he might be vulnerable to unethical behavior. I included enough specifics to be credible, but not so much that it would be obvious I had inside information. I mentioned the harassment complaint by referencing HR records from 6 months ago, and suggested the company might want to review his current performance given past issues. I sent it from a temporary email account, routed through a VPN to mask my location. Then I waited. The response came faster than I expected. 3 days later, Jerry called me. Robert, did you do something at Nexus Solutions? Why? My contact there says David was called into HR this morning. They're conducting some kind of review. Security escorted him out of the building and told him to work from home pending the outcome. That was fast. What did you do? I provided some information to the right people, anonymously. Jerry was quiet for a moment. You're really doing this? Yes. Okay. Just be careful. If they trace that email back to you... They won't. I was careful. He sighed. All right. Keep me posted. I hung up and felt a small surge of satisfaction. David was under investigation at work. The bank was investigating the loan fraud. The pieces were falling into place, but I wasn't done. I needed to deal with Mia. That was going to require a different approach. I sat in my car for a moment, considering driving away, but that would accomplish nothing. Eventually, I'd have to face him. I got out and walked toward my house. David stood as I approached. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "I need to talk to you. We have nothing to talk about." "Please, Dad, 5 minutes." The use of Dad instead of my name was deliberate, meant to evoke emotion, to remind me of our relationship. It didn't work. "You have 3 minutes," I said. "Then you leave." We sat on the front steps. David looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, his clothes rumpled, his hands shaking slightly. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what specifically?" "For everything. For the fraud, for the lies, for using you. All of it. I'm sorry." I studied him, trying to determine if the apology was genuine or just another manipulation. I couldn't tell. "Why are you apologizing now? Because you got caught? Because you're facing consequences? Or because you actually understand what you did wrong?" "All of those things," he admitted. "But mostly because I'm finally understanding what I lost. Not the money or the job or the house. You. I lost my father. You lost me years ago. You just didn't notice." "I know, and that's my fault." We sat in silence for a moment. "What do you want from me, David?" "I want you to drop the charges. I want you to tell the DA you were mistaken, that it was all a misunderstanding. I want you to give me a chance to make this right." There it was. Not genuine remorse, just another attempt to escape consequences. "I'm not going to do that." "Dad, please, I'm going to prison. Do you understand that? They're going to send me to prison." "I understand." "And you're okay with that?" "I'm not happy about it. But yes, I'm okay with it. You committed a crime. You need to face the consequences." "I'm your son." "And you stole from me. That doesn't change just because we're related." David put his head in his hands. "I can't believe this is happening." "You did this to yourself." "No," he said, looking up at me with anger replacing the desperation. "You did this. You could have handled this quietly, within the family. Instead, you went nuclear. You reported me to the police, sabotaged my job, destroyed my marriage, ruined my bankruptcy. This isn't justice. This is revenge. It's both, and you earned every bit of it. I made mistakes. I needed help and I made mistakes. That doesn't mean I deserve to have my entire life destroyed." "You didn't make mistakes, David. You made choices, deliberate, calculated choices to defraud me. And you would have gotten away with it if I hadn't fought back. Don't try to rewrite history now that you've lost." "So what? You're just going to let me go to prison? You're going to let them lock me up?" "I'm not letting them do anything. They're doing it because you committed crimes." "You're my father. You're supposed to protect me." I stood up. "I protected you for years. I enabled you, actually. I gave you money when you needed it, believed your lies, ignored red flags. I protected you from consequences over and over. And what did you do? You stole from me. You betrayed me. You planned to bankrupt me and walk away. So no, David, I'm not protecting you anymore. I'm done." "I hope you can live with yourself," he said bitterly. "I hope you can sleep at night knowing you sent your own son to prison. I'll sleep fine, because I didn't send you to prison. You sent yourself there." David stood, his face red with anger. "You're a bastard. You always have been. Mia was right about you. You're controlling and manipulative, and you use money to keep people dependent on you. This was never about the fraud. This was about punishing me for trying to be independent, for trying to build a life without you controlling everything." I almost laughed. The level of delusion required to believe that narrative was astounding. "David, you're not independent. You're 34 years old, drowning in debt, facing criminal charges, getting divorced, and about to go to prison. That's not independence. That's failure. And it's not my fault. It's yours. Get off my property. Gladly. I never want to see you again. Good. That's the first sensible thing you've said in years. David stormed to his car, got in, and drove away with a screech of tires. I watched him go, feeling nothing but a dull ache where my love for him used to be. That was the last time I saw David before his trial. The trial itself was anticlimactic. The evidence was overwhelming. The prosecution presented the forged documents, the testimony from bank officials, my testimony about never authorizing the loan. David's defense attorney tried to argue that it was all a misunderstanding, that David believed he had permission, that the family dispute was being criminalized. The jury didn't buy it. They deliberated for 3 hours and returned a guilty verdict on all counts. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Patricia called to tell me about it. The prosecution is recommending 4 years. With good behavior, he'd probably serve about 3. Are you planning to attend the sentencing? Should I? You have the right to make a victim impact statement if you want. You can tell the judge how the crime affected you. I've said everything I need to say. Then no, you don't need to attend. The judge will sentence him based on the guidelines and the evidence. What about Mia? The federal bankruptcy fraud investigation is ongoing. They're building a case against both of them. It'll probably be another few months before they move forward with charges. So this isn't over. Not quite, but the major battles are done. We hung up. I sat in my living room, trying to feel something about David's conviction. Relief? Satisfaction? Regret? All I felt was tired. The day of David's sentencing, I went to work as usual. I didn't follow the proceedings. I didn't check for updates. I just worked. Bill found me late in the afternoon. Robert, there's a call for you. Says it's your attorney. I took the call in the office. Robert, the sentencing is done. David got 4 years. 4 years. My son would be in prison for 4 years. Thank you for letting me know, I said. Are you okay? I'm fine. Robert, if you need to talk to someone, I can recommend some therapists who specialize in... I'm fine, Patricia, really. Thank you for everything you've done. We said goodbye and I hung up. 4 years. I went back to work. Changed oil on 3 cars, replaced a transmission, fixed an exhaust system. Physical work. Simple work. Work that let me not think. When I got home that night, I poured myself a drink, whiskey, neat, and sat on my back porch watching the sunset. My son was in prison. My relationship with him was destroyed beyond repair. I'd spent months systematically dismantling his life, and I'd succeeded completely. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt empty. I thought about David as a child, teaching him to ride a bike, helping him with homework, taking him to baseball games. He'd been a good kid once, or maybe I'd just convinced myself he'd been a good kid because I'd wanted to believe I was a good father. When had it gone wrong? When had he become someone who could lie and steal and manipulate without remorse? Or had he always been that person and I'd just refused to see it? I didn't know. And sitting on my porch, alone with my whiskey and my thoughts, I realized I'd never know. All I knew was that my son was gone. And whether that was his fault or mine or some combination didn't really matter anymore. It was done. I finished my drink and went inside. Tomorrow I'd go to work, do my job, live my life, move forward. But tonight, I let myself mourn. Not for David as he was now, but for David as I'd once believed him to be. For the son I'd thought I had, who'd maybe never actually existed. The next few months were quiet. I fell into a routine, work, home, occasional drinks with Bill and some of the other guys from the shop. I didn't date. I didn't socialize much. I just existed. Jerry called occasionally with updates. Mia was charged with bankruptcy fraud and identity theft. She took a plea deal, 2 years in a federal prison, restitution, Probation. She'd serve about 18 months. The divorce finalized. They had no assets to divide, only debts, which the court split equally. Not that it mattered. Neither of them could pay. Their house went into foreclosure. Their cars were repossessed. Everything they'd bought with stolen money and fraudulent credit disappeared. I should have felt satisfied. Instead, I just felt numb. One Saturday afternoon, about 6 months after David's sentencing, I was working in my garage when someone knocked on the door. It was Ashley Chen, David's former girlfriend. "Mr. Hanson, I'm Ashley. I don't know if you remember me, but I remember you. What can I do for you?" She looked uncomfortable. "I was hoping I could talk to you for a few minutes. About David." I almost said no, but something in her expression made me hesitate. "All right, come in." We sat in my living room. Ashley was nervous, fidgeting with her purse. "Mr. Hanson, I want you to know that I had no idea David was married when we started seeing each other. He told me he was divorced. When I found out the truth, I ended it immediately." "I know. I'm the one who told you the truth." She looked startled. "That email? That was you?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I wanted David's lies exposed. All of them. To everyone." She absorbed that. "I've been thinking about that a lot. About what you did, about the whole situation. And I wanted to ask you something." "What?" "Do you regret it? Any of it?" It was the same question Patricia and Jerry had asked. The question I'd been asking myself for months. "I don't know," I said honestly. David committed crimes. He needed to face consequences. But did I need to make those consequences as harsh as possible? Did I need to destroy everything? I'm not sure. He loved you, you know, or at least he said he did. He talked about you sometimes, about how you'd built a business, how you were successful, how he wanted to make you proud. He had a strange way of showing it. I know. I'm not defending him. What he did to you was wrong. What he did to me was wrong. But I think he was lost. I think he made bad choices and then couldn't find a way out of them. And I think maybe he needed help, not punishment. I gave him help for years. It didn't stop him from stealing from me. I know, and I'm not saying you were wrong to report him. I'm just saying, maybe there was a middle ground. Maybe there was a way to hold him accountable without destroying him. I thought about that. Was there a middle ground? Could I have reported the fraud without sabotaging his job? Could I have pursued financial recovery without pushing for prison time? Could I have held him accountable without crushing him completely? Maybe. But I'd been so angry, so hurt, so determined to make him pay that I hadn't even considered it. Maybe you're right, I said. But it's too late now. Ashley nodded. I know. I just thought you should know that whatever he did, he's still a person, and he's suffering. And I hope someday you can find peace with all this. Why do you care? He lied to you, too. Because I've made mistakes in my life. I've hurt people. And I've been given second chances. David won't get that. He'll come out of prison with nothing. No career, no family, no future. That's a hard thing to live with, knowing you've contributed to that. She stood to leave. Thank you for talking with me. Ashley, wait. Can I ask you something? Sure. When you were with David, did he seem happy? She considered. No, he seemed stressed, anxious, like he was constantly trying to keep up with something but couldn't quite manage it. I thought it was just work pressure. I didn't realize it was everything falling apart. After she left, I sat alone with that information. David hadn't been happy. He'd been drowning, and instead of asking for help, he'd stolen and lied and tried to solve everything with more debt and more fraud. And I'd been so focused on my own hurt that I'd never asked why. Never tried to understand what was driving his behavior. Maybe that made me a bad father. Or maybe I'd stopped being his father years ago when he'd started treating me like an ATM. I didn't know. What I did know was that I couldn't keep dwelling on it. What was done was done. David was in prison. Mia was in prison. Their lives were ruined. And I had to find a way to live with my role in that. So I did what I'd been doing for months. I went to work. I lived my life. I moved forward. But Ashley's words stayed with me. I hope someday you can find peace with all this. I hope so too.